Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Welcome to my new lecture. Dear students, in this lecture, I will explain an overview of the classification of kingdom Animalia. As earlier in the very first lecture, we studied that the kingdom Animalia is traditionally divided into two groups, that is the protozoa and metazoa or metazoans, right? We already studied that the protozoa includes unicellular or single-celled animals, while the metazoa, meta means multi, zone means animals, the metazoa includes the multicellular animals. But as we studied in the first lecture that the unicellular animals are single-celled animals, that is the protozoa, is now included in the kingdom Protista. And we have already studied the protozoa, they are also known as animal-like protists in chapter number 7, that is in kingdom Protista. We have already studied the zooflagellates, the amoeboid protists, the ciliates, the epicomplexes or sporozoa, which are the various phylums of the protozoa, the single-celled or unicellular animals. So now this protozoa is placed or included in kingdom Protista. We now don't study the unicellular animals or protozoa in kingdom Animalia. We now only study the multicellular animals or metazoans in kingdom Animalia. Then the multicellular or metazoans are divided into two groups, that is the pseudometazoans and eumetazoans are simply metazoans. As earlier I told you that now in kingdom Animalia we only study the multicellular animals or metazoans. We only study the metazoans or multicellular animals. And we have already studied in the characteristics of animals that animals have a multicellular body, or in other words, all animals are multicellular. Because the unicellular animals, the protozoa, are now included in kingdom Protista, and we now don't study the protozoa in kingdom Animalia. These metazoans or multicellular animals are divided further into two groups, that is pseudometazoans or parazoa and eumetazoans or metazoans or simply metazoans. Pseudometazoans, these are the simplest, it includes the simplest multicellular animals. These are not true multicellular animals. They are multicellular, but they are the simplest multicellular animals. They are made up of many cells, but they are, later on you will study that they are just a collection of cells which are not differentiated into tissues and organs. In other words, they lack tissues and organs. They are the collection of cells. They are made up of many cells, but their cells are not differentiated into tissues and organs. Or we can say that they lack tissues and organs. So that pseudometazoans are parazoa. It includes the simplest multicellular animals. It includes the simplest multicellular animals. The only phylum included in this group, in this parazoa, are pseudometazoans or simplest multicellular animals is phylum Porifera, also known as sponges. Porifera, also known as sponges. While the eumetazoans, as the name indicates, eu means true. As you have studied eukaryotes. Eukaryotes means eu mean true and karyon mean nucleus. Organisms which have true nucleus. तो eumetazoan means metazoan, you know, metazoan का मतलब है multicellular animals, and eumetazoan means true multicellular animals, means they are made up of many cells and their cells are differentiated into organs, into tissues, organs and systems. So eumetazone means true multicellular animals. They are simply known as metazoans, are true multicellular animals, right? So the multicellular animals may be pseudometazoans or parazoa, the simplest multicellular animals, and the true multicellular animals, eumetazoans, are simply called metazoans, right? Then if you look into this diagram, the eumetazoans are metazoans, the true multicellular animals, are further divided on two bases. Are further divided on two bases. One is on the basis of arrangement of cells in the body wall. स्टूडेंट्स एक बात पहले से जहन में रखें, मैं तो आपको ओवरऑल क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ एनिमल्स एक्सप्लेन कर रहा हूँ, लेकिन लेटर ऑन इसके बाद सब्सिक्वेंट लेक्चर्स में हम इसको डिटेल में, इस क्लासिफिकेशन को हम डिटेल में पढ़ेंगे. आई एम जस्ट explaining the overview of the classification of kingdom Animalia, but later on in the subsequent chapters I will explain each of these classification in detail, inshallah aziz. So as I told you that the eumetazoans, the true multicellular animals, are classified, are further divided on two bases. One is on the basis of arrangement of cells in the body wall. So on the basis of arrangement of cells in the body wall में cells की arrangement के basis पे the eumetazoans are classified into two groups. The one group is called diploblastic animals, diploblastic eumetazoans, and the triploblastic multicellular animals are triploblastic eumetazoans, right? And on the basis of body symmetry, the eumetazoans are also divided into two groups. One group is called great or group radiates, which have radial symmetry, and the other group is called great or group bilateria, which have bilateral symmetry, right? So the eumetazoans are further divided on two bases. On the basis of arrangement of cells in the body wall में cells की arrangement के basis में two groups है. एक group को हम कहते हैं diploblastic animals, दूसरे को हम कहते हैं triploblastic. आगे हम इसको इंशाल्लाह डिटेल में पढ़ेंगे. और on the basis of body symmetry they may be divided into great radiata. एक को radiates कहते हैं, दूसरे को bilateria कहते हैं, right? क्यों कि आया इनकी बॉडी सिमेट्री, इनमें रेडियल सिमेट्री है कि इनमें बायलैटरल सिमेट्री है. ये सिमेट्री और टाइप्स ऑफ सिमेट्री, रेडियल सिमेट्री, बायलैटरल सिमेट्री, इंशाल्लाह आगे हम डिटेल में पढ़ेंगे. सो द डिप्लोब्लास्टिक आर ग्रेट रेडिएटा. इट इंक्लूड्स ओनली वन फाइलम, दैट इज पाइलम सिलेंट्रेटा, which is also known as Phylum Cnidaria. Phylum Cnidaria. Now the triploblastic animals are bilateria. They are further divided into three groups on the basis of the type of body cavity, which is also called coelom. The body cavity is also called coelom. So on the basis of type of body cavity or coelom, the triploblastic animals are further divided into three groups called acoelomates, which have no body cavity, which have no coelom. Example of acoelomates is Phylum Platyhelminthes, which have false coelom or body cavity. They are called pseudocoelomates. It includes Phylum Nematoda. Its example is Phylum Nematoda or Eschelminthes. And those triploblastic animals which have true coelom, true body cavity, they are called coelomates. So on the basis of the type of body cavity, the triploblastic animals are divided into three groups: acoelomates, pseudocoelomates, or coelomates. Example of acoelomates is phylum Platyhelminthes. Example of pseudocoelomates is phylum Nematoda or phylum Helminthes, right? And the third group is coelomates. Now look into the diagram. The coelomates, which have true coelom or true body cavity, they are further divided into two groups: the protostomes and deuterostomes, on the basis of pattern of development. On the basis of pattern of development, the coelomates are divided into two groups: the protostomes and deuterostomes. Examples of protostomes are phylum Annelida, phylum Mollusca, and phylum Arthropoda, while examples of deuterostomes are phylum Echinodermata and phylum Chordata, right? So this is an overview of the classification of. Now look into this diagram again. So to summarize, the kingdom Animalia is traditionally divided into two groups: the unicellular animals and multicellular animals. The unicellular animals, they are also called protozoa, but the protozoa is now included in kingdom Protista, and we don't study the protozoa in kingdom Animalia. While the multicellular animals are called metazoans, we now only study multicellular or metazoans, multicellular animals in kingdom Animalia, which are divided into two groups: the pseudometazoans, which includes the simplest multicellular animals also known as parazoa. Example of parazoa is phylum Porifera, also known as sponges. And eumetazoans, the true multicellular animals, are metazoans. On the basis, the metazoans are further divided on two bases. On the basis of arrangement of cells in the body wall, they are divided into two groups: the diploblastic animals and triploblastic animals. And on the basis of body symmetry, they may be divided into grade radiata or grade bilateria. Then the example of diploblastic or radiates is phylum Coelenterata or Cnidaria. And then on the basis of the type of body cavity or coelom, the triploblastic animals are divided into three groups: the acoelomates, pseudocoelomates, and coelomates. Example of acoelomates is phylum Platyhelminthes, while example of pseudocoelomates is phylum Nematoda or Helminthes. And then on the basis of pattern of development, the coelomates are further divided into two groups: the protostomes and deuterostomes. The examples of protostomes are phylum Annelida, Mollusca, Arthropoda, while examples of deuterostomes are phylum Echinodermata and phylum Chordata. So this is an overview of the classification of kingdom Animalia. Thank you. Salam.